I've been doing this since before Shavuos. Yeah. This is the final sichas of the Rabbi. They're like this. They're like, it's a whole deep study. I think it's definitely a good study. Worth it. Okay. Waiting on you, big man. Here we go. So just to lead in, we said that besides the problem with the knife, which in this case was a fin, there was also a problem with the shechter, which in this case was Hashem. And Hashem is not apparently a kosher actor in the laws of shechita, because it has to be done through the agency of man. So just like we said that there's a loophole in the laws of the knife when it comes to this particular case of the shechita, which is what their whole sikha is based on, there's also a loophole when it comes to the shechter, that in this particular case, it was already part of the laws of shechita that Hashem could make this one shechting, even though in general all the laws of shechita prohibit such a thing. Again, the whole idea of Torah Hadasha is that it was already part of the laws of shechita for this particular case that God can shecht. So we had to explain why do the laws differ with this shechita from all other shechitas. Why here can God shecht? And we said that in order to understand this, we have to first understand what shechita is. Right? When you shecht an animal, it says ein v'shachat ela v'mashach. That shechting means to draw. And the whole idea of drawing is to elevate the animal into a position where it's edible by man, which basically we said yesterday, the whole purpose of all creation is to go up a level, right? To basically be consumed by the level that's higher than it. So we said, like, earth wants to become a plant, plant wants to become an animal, animal wants to become a human. Where does a human want to become? God. He wants to become God. That's why it says Hashem is a consuming fire, right? He consumes us, and if we're lucky, we get to be eaten by God, right? So, but in order to be eaten, in order to eat an animal elevate, you have to shecht it, which means you have to draw it up into another level. So the truth is, before Mashiach comes, all the laws of shechita are actually limitations on our being able to elevate, because man can only elevate through certain parameters. But in the future, we're saying that Hashem is going to shecht, because we're going to, on this particular shechita, which is a very significant concept of the shechita of the shur habar specifically, right? This ox it represents something, right? As opposed to just its simple meaning of being an animal. And the idea of the shechita that will take place then, which is like the ultimate elevation of all things, there will be no longer anything left to elevate when it's all done. Therefore, all the rules come off, what's the word? Bars, hold bars, what is it? No bars, what is it? No holds barred. That's what it is. No holds are barred. All holds are open. So basically, the shechita can go without any rules or regulations, like we said yesterday, sort of reminiscent of when Yaakov sent even live camels, so to speak, on his mincha, that these rules of the Torah, which limit our ability to elevate, will become undone in this particular case. And we started with this footnote 141, where we explained, you guys don't have the beginning of it, but you're going to have the end of it as I turn the page. So I'll just read it. This is from Likutei Torah, right? In I think it's Parsha Shmini, if I'm not mistaken, in Likutei Torah. Yeah, he says here, it discusses this mystical dimension of what the Shur Habar and the Leviathan are. Finally, right? We're talking about them as just actual animals. It's a whole deep connotation. What does the fish represent? And what does the ox represent? Does anyone know by any chance? Spiritually speaking? So he says over there that there are two different types of tzaddikim. And the Leviathan are sort of these tzaddikim that work in the very high, deep inner secrets of the Torah. He mentions there like the Rashbi and the Arizal, right? And they basically, the idea is that they're called Nune Yama. The fish in Aramaic are called Nune, the fish of the sea, which means they're hanging out in the secrets, secrets of the sea, which means they're dealing with the Panemius Torah, and they're on just a completely different level, essentially, than all the tzaddikim who deal with Nigla, right? Which is interesting. Like, I actually, this kind of came out. Rav Avadia Yosef when he passed away, it was one of the biggest levayas I think that happened ever in Eretz Yisrael in like recent history, or ever. And the next year, the question was, how do we, so to speak, honor the Yortzeit? So the whole world wanted to celebrate, like we do a lot of hilulas, right? Like you make a hilula and you celebrate. And his sons came out with like a thrashing, resistance to this. What kind of a minhag is this? You celebrate a Yortzeit? It's a day of fasting. It's a day of contemplation. What's going on over there? It's like a machlokes. Where did the idea of celebrating a Yortzeit come from? The Rashbi. The Rashbi said, I don't want anyone to be sad on my hilula. He called it a wedding day. And basically, the custom of celebrating Yortzeit is someone who's connected specifically to the Pnimiyas HaTorah. And if you don't have this connection to the Pnimiyas HaTorah, it's not the minhag. You don't celebrate a wedding day. All I'm saying is, why am I bringing this out right now? There's like a different Torah, basically, for those who are connected to the Ilana Dechaya, the tree of life. And these tzaddikim who are swimming in the sea, they're like towering figures beyond the tzaddikim that, so to speak, work on land, which is represented by the Shur Habor, which is the tzaddikim who are normal tzaddikim. They're like in the Torah giants and so forth, in Nigla. So the idea of the shchita of the Shur Habor represents essentially what ein v'shachat elev v'mashach, right? That these tzaddikim on this whole other level, in the end of days, they're going to raise up the Talmidei Chachamim that were like living in Nigla into a status which is way, way beyond what they were accustomed to. And this is the idea of the shchita that's going to take place, right? Okay, did you want to ask a question? Oh, someone. Yeah?
Is it a custom just for tzaddikim who are connected to Pnimiyas HaTorah to celebrate their past life?
What'd you say? Also for you? He's still alive. Working. Let's keep him here for a while. It's a good question. Not sure, but definitely in the ways of Chassidus, we generally celebrate, at least after the first year for sure.
I feel like even in the calendar of all the Hilulots that we have, even in the Kabbalah, we have like the widespread minhag is to like.
That's why like the world wanted to celebrate, right? Because the world's sort of taken on the Kabbalistic minhagim in our days. Okay, but anyway. So he says over here, anyway, that's kind of the mystical concept that there's going to be this shchita of the Shur Habor, like the elevation of the other tzaddikim into this higher realm of Pnimiyas HaTorah. But he says here that a quote from Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe, today such a shchita is paguma gemora. It's completely treif. And what's the treifness of it? Because of a hefsek, right? When you're shechting, you can't have like a jagged start and stop type situation. It's called a hefsek. So you have to do one clean shot, right? So this is what's ussering it, and that's what the fin is going to make a hefsek. He says, but in the future, there davka needs to be a hefsek. In other words, when this shechita happens and this elevation on this whole other plane takes place, right, there you need to have a shechita with a hefsek.
Is that why like a serrated or jagged blade
is usser?
Because there's a hefsek in between
Yeah.
each tooth?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Ki inyan hashchita zo hi bechinas. Now you guys have it with me in the bottom footnote, right? Aliyas shur habar l'mayla mayla. What is this shchita? It's really elevating this shur habar way up through the leviathan, through this deeper fish, so to speak, this sort of sea traveler, which represents the depths of the tzaddikim who learn Pnimiyas HaTorah, who's going to elevate him with his fins. V'lechein tzrich lo hefsek bein time. And the Rebbe says over there that there has to be a break in between in the midst of this aliyah. Because such an aliyah, where you're going to take basically the world into like infinite leagues beyond its place, it can't all happen at one shot. It has to be hefsek and breaks in between one. When you go from heichel to heichel, that's what he says. Each hefsek is like a different world, deeper into the depths of the Pnimiyas HaTorah, and it can't all happen in one shot. So it's actually very organized and deliberate. That it's not just like Hashem can do anything. Even that sort of usher shchita is specifically usher in the way that it causes a hefsek, and it's that type of hefsek which is required to make that type of aliyah in the future. Therefore, Hashem is going to specifically use a jagged edged when He makes this divine elevation.
Like what makes it asur has a parish.
Exactly.
So we're saying it's something allowed?
Yeah, we're saying it's allowed. The Torah Hadasha is going to come down and explain why it's mutter. We've already established that. The point he's just trying to make is why it's mutter is because it's God's aliyah, which is beyond the shechting of man. So it breaks the laws of man's shechita. However, we're now explaining why God's shechita has those laws. Because a hefsek and a jagged edge is required in order to sort of pace this incredible, the idea of the Leviathan is that he has fins and he can like take on leagues and leagues of water at one time. Like in one thrust of his fins, he can like cross half the ocean. The idea is that the levels of elevation that take place in this level are so vast that to get the ox to come along with you, it has to kind of be step by step. And that's why Hashem's shechita suddenly changes the laws into be needing a hefsek as opposed to where we are not allowed to make a hefsek. Because our laws, our elevations are minimal. Therefore, if you make a break in your elevations, you're going to sort of like slow down the elevation and ruin it. We have to make elevations swiftly, right? But because we're not making such high level elevations. Okay. Woo! Back inside. So we're going to start on top of page 192. Tes Zayin. V'yesh lahosif levayer kahanal. We want to go add on and explain, based on what we said earlier, that the hosafa of the Gimel Ari Miklat B'Yemos Mashiach. This notion of adding 3 cities of refuge in the days of Mashiach, the halacha goes like Beis Shammai, and the heter of the shechit of the Shur Abor. These 3 things has been the topic of this entire conversation, right? We said these are 3 things that are going to happen when Mashiach comes. One is we're going to add these 3 cities of refuge. Right now there's 6. When an accidental murderer has to go flee and find himself in a city of refuge, there are today 6. There's going to be 3 more added in the future. This is one point that we said that the whole sikha is based on. Secondly, in the future, all the halachas are going to go like Beis Shammai. And thirdly, we know that the main thing, which is the whole thing, is happening, is that the shechita of the Shur Abor is going to be mutter. All those things, 3 things together, are really one idea. We're going to look at them all deeper. However, we must first preface by what it says elsewhere. Regarding negative mitzvahs in the days of Mashiach. This was the topic that Rafi you've been waiting for. What is the concept of adding all these prohibitions in a time when the world will be basically perfected? What is the notion of saying you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, adding everything, the whole world goes like Shammai suddenly, when really the whole world's been perfected? Why do we need to remove ourselves from evil? What's the notion of a negative mitzvah in the future? Especially when the main service is in doing good. We're busy fixing the world. The whole idea of negative mitzvahs is to refine the world and stay away from evil. That will have been accomplished. Therefore, our main objective will be to make yichudim and bring the world higher and higher in the realm of good. What's the story of the whole concept of negative mitzvahs in the future? Does everyone understand this question? Here's the quote. Let's see if we can understand it. This comes from Tanya. In the end of the Tanya, it's called the Kuntras Achron, which is actually quite complicated, the most complicated part of Tanya. And he says that they will be fulfilled, these negative mitzvahs, in what's called their root above, in what's called Gevuros Kadoshos. What are Gevuros Kadoshos? Right? So Gevuros that are, so to speak, not Kadoshos, is the idea that godliness gets contracted and plummets into a state of affairs which looks like the opposite of Kedusha. It looks like klippas, right? So Gevuros leads to a restriction of godliness which creates klippas. However, Gevuros in their shorish, in their roots, are actually higher than Chasadim, and they're basically a type of, there's no klippas. So what does it mean, Gevuros? There's a type of godliness which is so to speak, first of all, the word Gevura means mighty. So in its simplest sense, it doesn't mean a contraction. It actually means something unbelievably strong. Right? But the problem is, because it's from the realm of Gevuros, it's so unbelievably strong that it's beyond comprehension. Now when that thing which is beyond comprehension falls into a state after the Tzimtzum, it looks like something beyond comprehension in a negative sense, which is, of course, klippas and things that look like they oppose God. But in their root, those very things which are opposing God are really something which is godliness at a level which is beyond comprehension. And that's what we call gevuros kadoshos. Gevura in its root is basically like a very, very strong level of divinity, which is so high that it defies understanding. So fulfillment of negative mitzvahs from the side of gevuros, we're going to fulfill them in such a way where we're accessing the true root of the gevuros as they are in their source. Whereas, let's say today, in the substandard level of dealing with the negative mitzvahs, we're dealing with the gevura as it's fallen, and therefore our fulfillment of a negative mitzvah is because there's something which opposes God, and we pull out the negative mitzvah to sort of oppose that which opposes God, to refrain that which opposes God. So we're dealing with the gevuras in their fallen state, and therefore the mitzvah comes to sort of like help us stay away from the bad guy. But when there's no more bad guy, and basically the world has been refined, and we're still going to have negative mitzvahs, what's this there for? It's not there to keep us away from evil anymore, because the evil's already at bay. So if there's going to be a negative mitzvah, you're going to, like, so to speak, refrain from something and not do it. It's not because there's something wrong with the world that you need to refrain from. It's because you're accessing the root of that negative mitzvah in its shoresh, which is actually higher than the positive mitzvah.
Does that practically look any different than now?
It doesn't maybe look any different, like you're not eating blood, but the idea is that you're not eating blood because you have a taiva to eat blood and you're going to fall and therefore you have to sort of hold yourself back and restrain yourself. You're connecting to this notion of the essential godliness of that act, which is something sort of, as we'll explain more about it. He's going to go all into it. So I don't, what's that? No, gevuras generally come from yira, but there's yira tata and there's yira ilah. So we're dealing with the yira ilah. In other words, yira tata is I'm afraid of something bad. Yira ilah is I'm overwhelmed with godliness and I'm like afraid to even like be in my own body because of the intense truth of God that's all around me. It's called yiras boshes. Like it's like an embarrassment of my own existence. I'm not going to fall into any negative things where I have to be afraid of myself. It's like it's a humility. Okay, so let's see what this is all about. Gevuros shelamayl mechasadim. Gevuros kadoshos are called gevura, which is above chesed. Hiyadua, as it's known, shashoresh the mitzvahs lo saseh hu lamayl mashoresh the mitzvahs aseh. Unbeknownst to most, the root of negative mitzvahs are actually higher than the root of positive mitzvahs. Right? First of all, there's an amazing little Zohar which explains this. It's amazing. You may have heard this one. It says, Zeh shmi liolam, v'zeh zichri, I think midor dor, or I think it's midor dor. There's a pasuk. This is my name forever, and this is my remembrance for all generations. What is my name and my remembrance referring to? God's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? So if you take the word shmi, what's the gematria? 350. The word shmi, shin, mem, yud. Shmi is 350. You add yud k. What do you get? 365. Which is what? The number of negative mitzvahs. Then take the word zichri, which is also God's name. What's the gematria of that? I'll try and save you. Well, you do the gematria. Help me out here. What's that? Zichri is 248 minus 11. What is that? 237, right? Zichri is 237. We're on the fly here, so we can't get our pencils out, but it's 237. If you add Vav K, it's the second part of Hashem's name, what does it come up to? 248. Which is an amazing thing. Like, if that is all you know, you can believe in God, right? There's a pasuk that said, this is my name and my remembrance forever. And if you add Hashem's name to it, you wind up with, first of all, 613. And not only do you come up with 613, you break the dividing line as 365 if you add Vav K, Yud K to the name, and 248 if you add Vav K to the name. Zohar. So what do we see from here? That the Yud K, which is the higher part of Hashem's name, is associated with what? The negative mitzvahs. The Vav K is associated with the positive mitzvahs, right? It's like built into the Torah like that. So we see from here, negative mitzvahs have a higher shoresh. Mamish, it's a math problem, right? The negative mitzvahs have a higher root than the positive mitzvahs because the Yud K of Hashem's name is associated with them. The Vav K is associated with the positive mitzvahs. What's the idea behind this? Yud K is called Hanistaros La Hashem Elokeinu. Right? It says Haniglaos Lanu L'Vaneinu. There's a pasuk. It says the revealed things for us and our children. Vanistaros, and the hidden things for Hashem Elokeinu. There's the idea of the hidden worlds and the revealed worlds. The hidden worlds is the Yud K. It's higher than the revealed worlds. It's that which cannot be revealed. And that's the Yud K. And what is that? The negative mitzvahs. The negative mitzvahs in their shoresh represent something very, very concealed and beyond comprehension. And that's why they're negative. The concept of negatives is the absence of being able to be seen. Whereas the positive mitzvahs, basically they come out and they have a form, they have a shape. Negative mitzvahs don't really have a shape or form. You can't build one, you just sort of don't, right? It's a negation. That negation on the low end, it looks lower than positive mitzvahs, because what are you doing already? You didn't accomplish anything. You're just not doing something. But in its source, not being is higher than being, right? And so this is the idea of the root of the negative mitzvahs that are above the positive mitzvahs. We also see this, go back inside, in the concept of what's called Maila Hasagas Hashlila Lagabi Hasagas Achiyuv. There's something called knowing something positively and then knowing something by negation. Knowing something by negation means, let's start with knowing something positively. You want to know something positively, you could take the measurements and you can, find out all the attributes of a particular thing because it's in your hand and you can positively identify them. What if I want to know what the spheros of Atzilus look like? I can't have a positive knowledge of such a thing because I never saw a sphere of Atzilus. So the only way I can know about such a thing is to take something that I do know about and say it's like this, but not. Right? So if there's, for example, wisdom of a man, so the chokhmah of Atzilus is like that, but not. You can't actually go and positively identify it. Right? You can only say what it's not. And so this is called Yedias Hasagas Hashlila, grasping, and this is where the big boys play, basically. If you want to really have sort of deep understandings of highfalutin things, which you can't see, touch, feel, or smell, you have to basically cultivate a knowledge of knowledge by negation. Right? You know it by negating something else, and then you're suddenly having this very, philosophical, abstract reality where you're perceiving things which cannot be perceived by negating the things you can perceive. So again, we see that negative knowledge, so to speak, is higher than positive knowledge. And therefore, when it comes to the action of the negative mitzvah of the future, the whole notion that you perform the mitzvah by not doing something, this is like a hook to this whole notion of accessing the negative space, right? It's like this is your way in. If you can perform the positive mitzvah, that means you've fallen into the Vav K. You've fallen into the non-abstract and basically the lowly things which are able to be revealed. So the performance of the negative mitzvah is basically a non-action. It's like a hint to the negative knowledge, to accessing that which is beyond comprehension. And this is what we mean, Gevoros Kadoshos. Holy Gevoros. This is basically what's going to be our whole notion, a complete different perspective of a negative mitzvah in the future. We can already sort of lock into that, even now, to some relative degree. But in other words, right now we think of a negative mitzvah as like, slap your hand, you don't touch that, right? Because we're thinking about a world of confusion and corruption. So you take it in a simple sense, that just stay away from the bad. What about when there's no bad? The not doing something is essentially an accessing point of the level of not. So therefore, if I want to grab onto the realms of Vav K, give me a positive mitzvah, I'll draw down Vav K godliness. If I want to access the Yud K, give me a negative mitzvah and it will be a kli for the godliness at the level of Yud K. Which, how do you do it? What do I do? Nothing, right? That's how you do it. You don't do something, and in the process of doing that, you basically draw down very, very high things. levels of the Yud K. Yeah.
I feel like we're not actually able to, because right now when we're grasping the negativeness, we're grasping it in the notion that it's what's in its contracting aspect. Like, don't do it.
Right.
I'm just thinking about it like on a parchment, you have a letter.
Right.
It's positive,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a negative space around it.
Right.
So when we think about the negative space, we're only really able to think about it as it's like contouring the actual letter, which is what's created. Like, don't touch the letter, aka stay around the letter.
Okay.
But then when you're reaching that space, it's like you're reaching the whole. You're going much above that. So it's like you're getting to the.
You still need the positive space to access the negative space. Like we're saying, how do you gain Yediyas Hashlila? By knowing something and then saying it's not that. So you still, even in the performance of a negative mitzvah in the future, there's still like the notion of not doing something. It's just that you're not really busy with that thing because the world is like not insignificant. You're trying to gain this higher ground. And that concludes our class for the day.